our EduHR Training Bites, Empowerment through Critical Skills Development. So recently we had our ECD management meeting where we discussed the topic of the ECD registration process with the Department of Education. And what I discovered throughout this meeting with various owners was that there is a severe lack of information. There's a severe lack of knowledge in the matters concerning compliancy to being registered with the Department of Education. So where we discovered a lot of the lack of information is especially with the processes behind the local municipality, what is required from the Department of Education, and what registrations are we talking about? Are we talking about the ECD registration, which would be from birth to 4, or are we talking about a dual registration, which is the ECD as well as the grade R? So there's a lot of confusion amongst our principals, and I'm hoping that through this series we'll be able to bring a lot of calmness to our sector, as well as bring direct information and information concerning the registration process and how to remain compliant. So join me as we discuss the ECD registration process with the Department of Basic Education. Now, when we register our ECD centers, we generally have this process and procedure towards compliancy, which would lead to registration. And I often hear from school owners is it feels overwhelming. They don't know where to start. They don't know who to go to. They don't know which department to speak to. And then it opens up to further confusion because various people will give their point of view on the process. And it just leads to this constant, dear overwhelming, stressful situation for any ECD owner. Now, we need to obviously look at the requirements, and we need to look at the how to and the who to, and through this, EduHR has actually come up with a 5-step plan. Now, I said 5-step plan. So this 5-step plan was created to actually make it easier for ourselves to follow a project. But in the end, we discovered that informing school owners about the 5-step plan made it easier for them to be able to follow through on their road to registration. Now, what is that 5-step plan? So let's look at it. You have town planning or the local municipality, health departments, fire and safety, DSD, DBE. So let's repeat them. We have local municipality or the town planning department, health departments, fire and safety, DSD, and lastly, DBE. Now it seems so simple when we cut it down to 5 simple steps. But what we are going to do is within this 5-step plan, we're actually going to discuss what is required in each step so that at the end of this process, you should actually have a completed registration file compliant with both the Department of Education ECD registration as well as the Department of Education Grade R registration. But why do we need to submit to both? Because the Grade R actually falls within the confines of the foundation phase departments, and therefore they have their own requirements when it comes to registration. And ECD still very much uses the processes that we had when we registered our partial cares with DSD, except now it is all under the banner of the Department of Basic Education. So join me as we go into each step and give you the nuts, the bolts, and the things that you need to be able to register your ECD with the Department of Basic Education. Now, the first step, being the step with the local municipality, is always the most daunting step and always the most scariest step, because we're often going into a municipal office without any knowledge. We don't, as the ECD sector, understand town planning, site development plans, title deeds, and all the documents that go with it. So what we are going to discuss in short is, why do we register with the local municipality? What is the process? And obviously, what documents are they going to require with us? And through this, I'm hoping to be able to give you the meat and bones that is required, that when you enter the realm of the local municipality, you are empowered with the knowledge that you need to have. So let's look at the two types of registration. You have full business zoning, or you have consent use. Now, I'm not going to focus on the full zoning, for the reason is full zoning is a large base project and is often used for when a property is no longer going to be a residential property and is going to be in its entirety a business. But we as the sector don't use business properties. We generally use residential properties, which we apply for consent use. And consent use is basically requesting the municipality that we use this residential property and we allow it to blossom into a business. Now, the municipality will require you to have certain documentation for this. And one of those documents is a site development plan. Now, a site development plan generally comes with step 2 of a town planning process. But from my point here at EduHR, I'm going to advise you to make it part of the first step. So when you apply, you have a site development plan. And a site development plan has basically taken the original plan that is registered and approved by the municipality as a residential home and has created it into a business process or a business plan. So this plan, which now would be approved by the municipality, is going to say things like classroom, bathroom, office, kitchen, play area. It's not going to say things like bedroom, toilets, shower, garage, because we're moving away from the personalization or the residential side of the building, and we're now going to a business outlook. At the same time, this site development plan needs to have your parkings drawn in on it. So please don't think that you don't need parkings because we're an ECD center. You still need to comply with the bylaws that state that you require 0.1 or 0.2 parkings for the amount of children in your school and 1 parking for every classroom. Okay. Doesn't matter if you are a day mother, if you are a small base ECD with only 50 children, or if you have 120 children, or if you have multiple schools, you are required to comply with the legal aspects of town planning. So it's very, very important that you understand what the municipality is going to require from you. So let's delve deeper into it and follow the information flow. And at the end of it, you should understand what your municipality requires from you. when we discuss consent use or local municipality, we often are dealing with a topic within the process which causes a lot of stress and frustration. And rightfully so, I do understand why we have that stress and why we have that frustration. But the reality is it is a requirement for us. So let's look at why we find this so frustrating. Now, when you are driving around, and generally most of our sector is parents, you have either sat in traffic congestion or struggled to drop your own child off at a school. And this is all because at some or other point you've realized the school doesn't have enough parkings for all the children within the school. And you as an ECD owner generally will say, but if they don't comply, why should I comply? But the reality is if you require consent use, you need to comply. It's simple, it's easy, it's not a very difficult answer to give. So if you want your consent use, you're going to need to comply with the parking regulations. So let's look at what the parking regulations are and how many do we need. So if you are categorized as category A in most municipalities, you will need to have 0.2 parkings per child and 1 parking per classroom. So if you have 50 children, you need 0.2 parkings for every child enrolled. Okay, so that for every 50, you are going to need to have 0.2. And if you have 5 classrooms, you're going to need to have 5 parkings. Now, if you are in category B, you would need to have 0.1 parking for every child and 1 parking per classroom. So let's stick to the 50. If you have 50 children, you are going to need to have 0.1 parking for all 50 children. So for every child enrolled, you will need 0.1 parking, and you will need to have 1 parking for the classroom. So if you have 5 classrooms, you will need to definitely have a starting point of 5 parkings. Okay, that is the legal requirement. But it later in the bylaws actually describes how a parking looks and how we need to define a parking. And I am going to discuss that in various manners with you so that you understand the why and the how of the parking space. We've made it to step 2, the environmental health permit. Now, the environmental health permit is issued to us by the City Health Department or the Environmental Health Department. Now, these officials who still make up part of our local municipality are very specific in what they do. So they come out to our schools and they assess the safety of the property from an environmental point of view. Now, they will look at things like ventilation. Do you have enough ventilation? They will look at the lighting. Now, when we say lighting, lighting is learn to read lighting, learn to learn lighting. So if your property cannot have a child read a banner or a poster, then they will say your property isn't lit enough and you need to improve the natural lighting. Not place more lights in the roof, but improve the natural lighting so that even if the lights in the building aren't on, children can still see and move around the property safely. Okay? They will also look at your kitchen and what requirements you have in your kitchen, from basins to pest control to flumes and extraction and things like that. They will also look at our bathrooms, from the size of our toilets to, if we're using adult toilets, how are children going to safely use the toilets. If there is a bath, to clean a child that has soiled themselves or got sick on themselves. They will look at the space within the bathroom. They will look if the smell can move away from the bathroom. So again, the ventilation process. They will also look at your playground, the safety of your playground. So what equipment do you have? Is the walkway safe? Are children going to fall? They are also going to look at things like, do you have a receptacle? So when you have removed the dirt from the classroom, where does the rubbish go? How long is it going to stand? Is it going to smell? Is it going to attract pests? They're going to look at all those things. So in this section, we're actually going to specifically go into the requirements from the health department. So we've made it to step 3, the fire safety certificate. Now, a fire safety certificate is issued by our local municipality as well, but again, a different department. And this department will either go by the name of Emergency Medical Services or the Department of Disaster Management. And this generally depends on which municipality you're in. Now, the purpose of this permit is to ensure the safety of the occupants using the building. So in the case of an ECD center, they are going to specifically look at the safety of the staff and the safety of the children in the building. And it's generally done by looking at if you have the correct equipment for when an emergency happens, if you have hazardous objects or chemicals such as gas on your property, and they'll also look at if you have the correct procedures in place for when an emergency happens. And we're going to look at each of those things individually in this section.